Easter is weird. Beautiful, but weird. You've got kids in cute outfits, ladies in big hats, and candy. That's great. But then there's rabbits, eggs, a zombie named Jesus. What else do you call a guy that comes back from the dead? For Christians, Easter is the holiest of holy days. Don't tell Santa. Yet for many of those outside of the Christian faith, Easter remains a curious celebration. One of these eggs is raw, the rest are hard-boiled. I'm giving myself 3 chances. I just dropped the raw egg. Dang it. Have you noticed that the day on which Easter is celebrated jumps around? Sometimes it's really early. Happy Easter. It still feels like winter. And other times it's really late. Where you been? Why can't it be on the same day? The very first Easter, or the resurrection of Jesus Christ, occurred during the Jewish festival of Passover. Therefore, early Christians wished to keep their annual celebration connected to that holiday. But because the Jewish people used a different calendar, one based on the moon rather than the sun, the holiday seemed to dance around compared to the civil calendar. And in a world without printed calendars, or the internet to answer everything, why don't people like me?
Here's what I found on the web for why don't people like me.
It became difficult to keep the two holidays in sync. So the Christian church eventually adopted its own lunar formula for calculating Easter. Specifically, Easter happens each year on the first Sunday after the first full moon on or after the vernal equinox. Wait, what? But even that didn't quite solve the problem, as one group of Christians decided to calculate this formula based on the Gregorian calendar, while others decided to calculate it based on the Julian calendar. It's a divide that persists to this day. Think of it like this. The date of Easter changes because it's based on the moon, and our civil calendar is not. Why is it based on the moon? Because it used to be based on Passover, which is also based on the moon, but in a different way. Or, Easter happens whenever your grandmother invites you over to her house to eat ham and hunt for eggs. Deal. But what about those eggs? Several historians argue that their connection to Easter is quite Christian in origin. In the early 9th century, the Catholic Church ruled that Lent, the season leading up to Easter, was to be observed by avoiding all meat. No meat? I'm gonna need a verse for that. It's found in 2 Opinions, chapter 3. This meant that eggs harvested in that time needed to be preserved, which was often done by dripping them in melted fat or wax. These eggs would then be available to eat later at the end of Lent on Easter, with some being decorated and given to children. Happy Easter, son! Now make me breakfast. As for the significance of Easter itself, it turns out that that's the simplest part of this holiday to understand. Every religion has what it considers to be its linchpin moment, upon which its credibility is built, and all subsequent tenets of the faith rely. For example, in Islam, the revelation to Muhammad of what would become the Quran is considered just such an event, and is observed annually during Ramadan. For Christians, the central critical moment of their faith is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If in fact Jesus Christ did rise from the dead, it would signal 3 things. First, it would validate every promise Christ made. After all, if you rise from the dead, as you predict, everything else you've said receives instant credibility. Second, it would vindicate Christ. He would not be a failed savior whose efforts ended in defeat. He would in fact be the Messiah, the saving king, who has all power in his hand, and who used his cross to accomplish a great good, offering his life as a suitable sacrifice for the sins of the world. Lastly, it would signal victory. If Christ did in fact rise from the grave, it would mean that humanity's single greatest fear, robots, they're everywhere, death, has been defeated. It would mean that though we live in a world where death happens, we no longer live in a world where it gets the last word. Jesus does. My mom always said I got the last word. Which, you must admit, if true, changes everything, and is certainly worth celebrating. Crazy calendars, chocolate bunnies, and all.